Welcome, everyone. I am here with Jake Yu. He's got his own YouTube channel. Many of you probably know him from Twitter. I will just pull that up so you can see his Twitter account. If you are not already following him, he is a must follow for Palantir coverage, as you'll see here. So today, I thought it would be a great time to kick off the start to the Palantir podcast, as I will call it. I'll call it Palantir Vision Podcast, so we don't get in any trouble with being confused as an official Palantir podcast. But anyway, I want to talk about leadership, operations, financials, and the future of Palantir in general in a more long form discussion. So without further ado, here is Jake. So I'll just switch it on over, and please bear with me, guys, getting used to this setup here. Jake, do you want to sort of introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are?
Yeah, Jake Geary. I started covering companies, 7 or 8 years ago. Finally got invested into Tesla in 2018. That kind of introduced me to my broader investment kind of journey. But yeah, just kind of fascination with companies that are doing impressive things was kind of my introduction to following them. Yeah, I'm really excited about Palantir, and I've been putting a lot of time into looking into it.
Great. So I think we can just start off before talking about the leadership, actually, just a quick disclosure. Of course, none of the following is financial advice. We're just having a conversation here. We don't know if what we are discussing will come to fruition. We're just kind of get a general back and forth about the current state of Palantir and where we see it going in the future. Personally, as most of you know, probably I am long Palantir shares, not options of any kind just yet, maybe leaps in the future. But that's where I'm coming from. And then Jake, I believe, is also a shareholder. So just so you know, up front.
Yep, long-term shareholder.
So I did want to talk with leaps too. Great. So starting off with Palantir leadership, I think this is a pretty good place to start. We'll talk about Karp, then Sankar, then Teal, because I think those are the main three key players when it comes to Palantir. So first, starting off with Karp, he's a very interesting individual. We know he doesn't really have a traditional background, got more philosophy. His hair is what everyone looks at right off the bat. I saw someone saying that, I forget the exact comment. It was just pretty much every third comment on one of his interviews is about Karp's hair. So he's got that unconventional look to him, and he's not afraid to kind of be outside of the box, especially with his appearance, with the way he leads the company. I'm pretty sure they've talked about, we'll get to the talent later on, but they've talked about they're not afraid to get the best talent, no matter who it is, really, to get Palantir, the company, going. So I wanted to kind of have a little bit of a conversation about if we think he is a visionary and if we really think he is the best person to be leading this company. Of course, we have Sankar behind him, but do we think what he has said before about leading for the next 5 years, kind of staying 5 years ahead? They had to kind of reverse course on a commercial product and then relaunch what ended up being Foundry, which then has been very crucial in the time of the pandemic for many companies. So much so that they've been able to offer it for free in some cases, to then offer up and generate the alpha, if you will, for the government side as well. But what do you think about the whole discussion about them being 5 years ahead? Is Karp going to be able to continue to lead in that way? And do you think Palantir will be able to stay innovating with a rapid pace of innovation on the front of pretty much just being an innovative software company?
Yeah, I don't see anything that would indicate otherwise. I like to listen to founders and leadership to hear what they have to say, and then kind of track their progress over time to see, are they doing what they say they're supposed to be doing. And I mean, if you go look at videos from like in the 2010s, or even early 2000s, they were giving demonstrations about the capabilities of Gotham. I guess it wasn't the early 2000s. Gotham really started rolling out in the mid 2000s, the 20-aughts. But that was impressive at the time. The stuff that they were doing And there's this one presentation, I think it was at a FedCon, where the forward deployed engineer went through all the capabilities of Gotham, and at the end of it, he exported everything that he had onto a PowerPoint document, something that you could present. So it had all your intel that you'd gathered, how you came to these conclusions, the timelines, and the events that were broken out. And I'm certainly not aware of a company doing that. That level of data analytics and compilation and visual representation all in one product that's so efficient. So I believe them when they say that they're significantly ahead of not only other companies, in the data AI, data analytics spaces, but also definitely who they say their competition is, their customers. It's going to be difficult for any customer, who's not in tech, to attract that kind of talent to solve those issues, with few exception. I would believe that, some Silicon Valley companies might be able to handle and get by without Palantir and be as successful, but that's definitely the exception. And I think the atmosphere that Karp keeps talking about, with catering toward engineers and keeping focus on engineering product development as the culture of the company, is incredibly important. And so that's definitely the right goal for the future, to continue that technological advantage.
Yeah, and even just, I was looking at this morning, a page that I hadn't seen before, but even on their website, under the first tab here, under careers, it's they say an engineering culture, and they go on to say, I'm not sure if you've seen this before, but they're talking about the products they're kind of trying to build, and they've only just really started, pretty much. So yeah, I think this is a good point too, because we've seen, as software companies get bigger, they become more bloated. And you think of like a company as big as Apple, they try and keep their teams pretty small, so that their software divisions for whatever products they're working on are more focused. But that is harder to do as they grow. And I'm just wondering, because Palantir is very much in that growth phase, pretty much still a startup at this point, burning through a lot of capital for the operations, for the stock-based compensation, at least at this point, if they will be as focused the bigger they get. And I wonder if the leadership kind of plays into that, if Karp will, and the others at the top, the executives, will be kind of making sure the teams are focused and actually executing as well as they can. And maybe that's something to look for. But I don't think they are actually. Do you know how many employees they have? I haven't checked that figure recently.
No, that'd be a good thing to follow over time. But no, I'm not sure.
Actually, usually they have this on Yahoo Finance. But the other thing I wanted to talk about while I'm pulling this up is the fact that Karp isn't always at some of these investor events. He's usually, or at least we've had a couple earnings reports where he's kicked it off with a video on the front end of it, but it's probably not under financials. But could you speak to his absence at some points during the key investor events, especially demo days and double click events?
Yeah, well, even the earnings calls. I mean, I've been kind of initially when he was absent, I thought, oh well, this will change. This may be temporary. He might be out of overseas, or handling a deal. But yeah, it kind of continues to happen. And then if he is present, it's usually like a pre-recorded message. And I definitely would like to see more of him. The only counter to that is that he is active in interviews, and really pushing the message and philosophy of the company. So that's encouraging. And it's almost, like him and Sankar are like a yin and yang, where Sankar is definitely at every event, very, to the point, and more technical than Carp, which you'd want to a degree in the COO. They don't have to know all of the ins and outs of the technicalities of the product, but you want them to be at the forefront of that development. And so it's been nice to see Sankar step up more. And if I didn't know any better, based on the stock-based compensation Carp is getting, I would think that Sankar was about to replace him, maybe in the next 5 years, and they're kind of getting people used to that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So just to follow up on what we were trying to figure out, which it looks like about 2,500 employees, so still relatively small, all considered. But yeah, I did want to talk about Sankar next, so thanks for leading us into that. I think of him more as kind of to your point almost. I wrote down the Tim Cook to Steve Jobs, because Tim Cook was under Steve Jobs, the operations guy, the one you go to for the operations. And Steve Jobs was sort of the more visionary leader, but then of course, tragically he passed, and Tim Cook was naturally there to take on the role as CEO. You could say the company is not the same since then. They've still done very well financially, but there definitely is a change. I'm not sure if that is a good point. I mean, everyone knows about his compensation. I'm not sure that's an indication that he's going to be leaving anytime soon, considering they just direct listed. I think there would probably be more of a transition period. So I think definitely he'll be around for the next 3 to 5 years at least. I think he's very much focused on the company and looking forward to its success in the future. But I do agree with you when you say that Sham is definitely a better public speaker. I also agree that he's the one to listen to on the demo day events. He's actually been the only executive on those calls, which is a little unfortunate because I think Carp might be better at giving a high level overview of why this is important, what it means in the context of the economy and just really anything, especially with any sort of cultural challenges. But I do think you're right when you say he definitely has more technical understanding, and he very well could be running the company if that needed to happen. But I think they are in a good place with both of those leaders. But Peter Thiel often does get brought up as well, being the chairman. So I'm wondering, what do you think about his involvement, or pretty much lack thereof, not really being a very a person that's very much involved in the day-to-day of the company, at least from what I can tell?
Yeah, I would imagine that his involvement earlier on in the company was pretty heavy, because he does in some of his public speaking events back in 10 years ago or so. He mentions Palantir. He answers questions about Palantir in his book 0 to 1. He mentions it twice, and I think in one of those references he says that Palantir is set to what was the wording? Set to return more capital than any other company that they'd invested in, except for Facebook. And that's an impressive thing to say, especially because his book came out in something like 2013, 2014, and I've listened to a lot of Thiel interviews and talks, and it can get kind of difficult to really communicate what he's saying, because he does get political so much, and I think that's rooted in Palantir's ideology of only working with the West. The 6,000 companies that they've addressed for their TAM, that excludes China and Russia, and that's becoming less important with Russia, but certainly China. There's more and more opportunity costs with that kind of business strategy, and I think that's rooted in Thiel's influence on the company. And so I think he's kind of pulled back from the public eye in recent months, and in the last year or so, and kind of, especially as they were going public, he maybe didn't want his political leaning to influence customers' decisions or the perception of the company at all. Especially when they had a little bit of controversy about their deals with ICE and things like that. They've done well to kind of avoid to answer those questions when they come up. CARP's spoken to that, but I definitely see CARP reading from the same playbook that Thiel lays out in his book 0 to 1 about how to build a monopoly, and notes on startups or how to build the future. And it's just like everything that they're doing is like verbatim in that book.
Yeah, that's all good stuff. I actually listened to the audiobook before in hearing about and investing in Palantir. I heard about it from the book. But I think I do need to revisit it, as I think that maybe may have been some key points that I kind of missed in the audiobook, just kind of passively listening. But I think that pretty much is required reading. We'll leave a link to that. But I think, this has been a good discussion on the leadership. I think they definitely do have some characteristics that go back and forth with CARP's politics. You brought up Thiel's politics and kind of waiting each side out, which I think is a very good thing, especially for, as you said, a company that deals with different nations. And also you don't want to get too political one side or the other, dealing with a company, because they have to worry about the repercussions of that. So I think that is huge. So now I want to kind of transition over to the operations for Palantir, and we'll kick this off by talking about the mission. So they say, quote, "Our mission is to help our users, the people doing the hard work on complex real-world problems. We do this by writing software that enables effective analysis, against complicated data-driven problems." So I wanted to ask you, do you think this is maybe a little bit too ambiguous of a mission? We know, of course, the company I think of when a mission statement is brought up is, of course, Tesla. Maybe perhaps a little broad of a mission, but very focused, very direct on what they're trying to accomplish. All of your operations kind of follow back, trying to accomplish their mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. So I'm just wondering, this is a very ambitious mission, kind of considering how broad it is. Do you think, assuming this is, I've looked at this statement before, but do you think this is perhaps a little bit too broad for Palantir? I do understand that they're dealing with so many different things. They've got their 3 main platforms, and it would kind of be difficult to sum that all up into one mission statement. But what are your thoughts on the mission as it stands here?
Yeah, it could be more concise. I think, like you referencing Tesla's mission statement verbatim is kind of an indication to how good of a mission statement it is. It's short, it's to the point, and it's unifying. Whether or not you agree with the idea of transitioning the world to sustainable energy, everybody knows what Tesla's mission statement is after that. They hear it once. So yeah, this is a little lengthy, and and like you say, I think it's a little ambiguous. I have heard interviews with forward deployed engineers at Palantir where they say that some of the most rewarding times out there working with companies is when they find the individuals in an organization who are passionate about the work they're doing, but they're frustrated by the stumbling blocks and the roadblocks in front of them. They're working with inefficient enterprise systems. They don't have the tools that they need to do their job. And so that first sentence, help our users, the people doing the hard work on complex real world problems. I think that's going to speak to a lot of employees and a lot of companies who might, that'll really resonate with. But it's definitely also very important to resonate with your employees and yeah, I could see it, very, very useful mission statement. But maybe not as, get you out of the bed in the morning, as Tesla's.
Okay, great. So that kind of leads into what we will now discuss being Palantir's platforms. So we recently had the 21 launch earlier this year for Foundry and Gotham, and then we can also talk about Apollo. So starting with Foundry, this right now it seems to be split, the main revenue from the company between Foundry and Gotham. Foundry being, of course, the commercial enterprise platform, and Gotham, the government. I think it is going to flip. I believe Gotham is ahead right now in terms of revenue. I think many people, especially on Wall Street, are also expecting the commercial revenue to soar in the coming years. So I want to have a little bit of a discussion on, and we can also bring up the bit about the total addressable market. So if I just zoom in to refresh everyone's memory, we have the estimated TAM in the commercial sector, that being correlated with Foundry, of $56 billion. And they define it as approximately 6,000 companies with more than 500 million in annual revenue. So 500 million is no number to really laugh at. That's pretty much when I think a startup is kind of starting to mature, or I'm not entirely sure, but that is definitely not a small company right there. Sorry, it's just closed. So I think there's definitely something to be said about them not really including the more medium to small size businesses in that figure. So even just seeing 56 billion, you put a price to sales on that, and you're already really well into a good market cap. Of course, we're looking for a strong return on our investments here. And I think if Palantir is able to deliver on the 6,000 companies that they have addressed here, I wonder if they're being conservative, if they believe this is actually more ambitious, or if they think it's something that's manageable. But I am looking to this when I think about Foundry. And right now, I think they're just over 100 or something commercial customers. I think those maybe are perhaps bigger clients, bigger contracts than what they're going for. Because if we come back over here, 56 billion divided by 6,000 is actually about a little over $9.33 million per contract. So I think some of the contracts they're getting are actually bigger than that, but then you have to kind of factor in how long is the contract. So I'm not entirely sure if they need bigger contracts or what, but they definitely need more contracts. So we'll be talking about a little later the marketing and how they're going to actually be able to get that. But I just think Foundry, at least, really is the flagship product. They've talked about it so much. They're really leaning into the double-click events, modern operating system for the modern enterprise. I saw them, they wrote it wrong once. They confused the order of the sentence, which I thought was kind of funny, but I do think Foundry pretty much is going to be the reason to invest in this company and the reason for strong returns in the future. My thesis is pretty much that medium to small size businesses will adopt Palantir 5 to 10 years out to a significant degree. After the next 5 years, we have adopted a lot of the larger businesses that have started to use Foundry, and that'll kind of just unlock an upward trajectory for top line, which we'll get to a little bit of a discussion there, but also stock price as well is what I'm assuming. So what are you thinking about Foundry and kind of the growth there?
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely the main driver of my investment thesis, the market opportunity, especially in the United States. You can see last quarter, they grew their U.S. commercial revenue something like 83%. And their overall commercial growth was relatively small, especially compared to their government contract growth. But if their U.S. commercial growth continues at anywhere close to that 86% year over year, we're going to see some major growth there. And I've kind of gone back and forth with a lot of kind of like valuation models for, discounted cash flows, and trying to see like what are they actually trying to do when they say they're 30% year over year growth? Is it so much so sandbagged that they're really going to be in those upper 40s like they have been for years to come? Or are they just going to be content with the fact that, hey, we can grow 30% year over year for 10 years at a slow and steady methodical pace? And that's, 30% over 10 years is a better, that's a better, revenue figure than high 40s for just a couple. So
yeah, it's a 10x, I believe. 30% 10 years. And yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. So
also,
it's kind of, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that 30%, while it might look kind of small or conservative, at least for now, is actually could get tough if they're not able to market and sell their products, which I don't believe they won't be able to. But I think they are being conservative for a reason. They have in the past, historically, at least we've seen, they've been sandbagging quarter or over quarter outlook. And I think the 5-year, which we'll get to, the $4 billion by 2025 is a little ridiculous. I don't even think they're forecasting for 30% growth there. But anyways, I think they're going to definitely outpace the 30%, especially in the coming years. But we'll see how well they're able to maintain that. It kind of depends on how things go with smaller size businesses. I think maybe 15 years out, they'll have a consumer product by then, which will upend the 30% growth if they're able to maintain that. But definitely 30% is nothing to sneeze at, and it's something that could be a huge driver for the stock. I'm one that would prefer a lower sustainable growth rate than, as you said, one which would kind of burn out and then the stock kind of collapses, the multiples fall off because this growth is baked in and it has to get baked out, if you will. So I think the estimates are in a healthy place here. Yeah.
So about that commercial product, do you have any ideas about what they might want to market? I know they came out with a Chrome plugin for monitoring your activity online, and I think it's like password protection. But do you have any idea what they might want to market toward the public?
Right. So I think that's a good kind of first demonstration of what they could be doing, because if we think about them, obviously they're focused on the commercial and government products, which is a little hard to transfer over to a a consumer product. But we think about their values, we think about what they're focused on. It's privacy, especially when dealing with sensitive information. And so I do think that is a good place to start, which they have with the Chrome plugin, which kind of, I think you're right about I believe, I didn't look into it. I probably should download it and give it a try, but it's something about password protection and security. But I think also in our ever increasing digital world, they could have definitely a role to play, considering the artificial intelligence they're trying to develop, and especially between Foundry and Apollo, I think there is some overlap in the code. At least I'm just assuming that the ecosystem kind of plays back and forth, and that strengthens both the platforms. But kind of bringing that over to a consumer product, I feel that there could be a way for Palantir to kind of reconcile digital history or something to protect security, but also to maybe inform some sort of intelligence. So I think it's unclear at this point. I don't think Palantir is anywhere close to launching something like this. They're definitely focused on their commercial and government clients and continuing the pace of innovation there with their products. We just saw the 21 launch. So they're very much focused on those. But it is a good point, because I am factoring that in a little bit. I'm considering more of a call option on my shares kind of 15 years out, maybe 10 years, but I think it's a little bit more than a decade out before we can kind of consider anything like this. I think it is something to think about when you're investing if you're considering this a long-term investment, but I'm not too sure if it has any meaning anytime soon. So that's what I'm thinking. Was there anything that you thought they could kind of play off of with their platforms?
No, I mean, yeah, because I've heard that before. The idea that they might, spin out a consumer product, and I've been really trying to, imagine it. And I guess it's not so. You just said that they have a lot of, identity protection history and experience. That maybe something like a full blown browser. If they make a plugin for Chrome and I don't know how well you could compete with the well entrenched tech companies. I think the most downloaded browser is Chrome by a ridiculous amount. But yeah, I mean, if they gain a reputation sufficiently enough in the next 5 years of about really protecting individual liberties and data. And they're just the go-to. It might be that they can market something toward consumers that would really protect your identity online.
Yeah. So I mean, I think we're kind of in the same place here. Maybe I'm a little more bullish on that idea than you are because we haven't really seen any indication that they are looking to do it because I think it's definitely some number of years out. So they're not necessarily kind of telegraphing that in a public way. But if you were interested, I did have a conversation with JG from Beyond Our Money where we were talking about a potential application of some sort of Neuralink and Palantir partnership, which you may have seen, but which is perhaps even more of a reach. But I think that is probably something where Palantir being some sort of third party on the Neuralink platform, which is nowhere near close to general public availability, let alone anyone using it, except for maybe Elon Musk. But I think that is perhaps somewhere that Palantir could get a head start by being one of the first to develop on a potential layer above the Neuralink first party. Kind of just spitballing here because I have no idea how that's actually going to work out, but I would assume there's going to be some sort of application platform for them to perhaps build upon.
Yeah, and I know. I mean, Neuralink's going at a pretty fast pace. It's still pretty early, and something about Elon Musk's companies is that if it doesn't exist on the market, they'll do it in-house. But if it does exist, they typically do outsource it if it meets their requirements. And I think that it is kind of a moonshot idea, but Apollo's AI on the edge, Apollo's ability to manage AI models to air-gapped devices. That might be a really good candidate because they could be contracted or used to manage Neuralink devices to update and improve AI models because their ability to upgrade software and actively manage it to monitor for issues with the update and then roll it back so quickly. That's pretty impressive. They have to do less in-house testing of each iteration of the software because Apollo autonomously monitors it and very quickly stops a catastrophic failure. So that might be an interesting combination if they use Apollo for rolling out their own AI model.
Yeah, all right, good stuff. Circling back on the discussion for platforms, I've been thinking more about Apollo recently. I still don't really understand the grand scope of it, but so I think I will need to rewatch some of their earlier demonstrations of it because I've mainly been thinking about Foundry and Gotham. But what do you think of Apollo as kind of a sleeper platform that will drive growth? We're talking about how Foundry is going to be the main driver of growth. Gotham as well is going to be pretty significant in the next few years, expanding to many branches of government as we have seen. And then we've got Apollo here, which they said they created or that they've launched publicly because they thought, well, we made this for ourselves for the iteration and development of Foundry and Gotham, and they thought this is perhaps a useful tool initially to let other companies open up and use. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on Apollo, and do you think it could be significant for the company in the future?
Definitely, yeah. I think there's yeah, there's going to be a lot of commercial applications for the management of AI models on edge devices. In factories, warehouses, all over. I mean, even companies that do sell consumer products, you could manage those AI models with Apollo, and it's interesting how quickly they did roll it out, because I forget where Shyam Sankar said it, but it didn't exist before their IPO. I mean, it's only a couple months old, and they've already started marketing it pretty heavily. And so, yeah, I think as 5G networks allow more and more connected devices, and really implement the opportunity to use AI on the edge. That's just an expanding market that if they can just keep pace with the expansion of that market, that's a tremendous revenue driver for them.
Yeah, I also had a thought that it could perhaps be even a lock-in tool in the future, kind of to retract anyone from leaving the Palantir ecosystem, because if anyone is writing to Apollo, they're going to continue to, because that's kind of leads back to the idea of the stickiness and it being really hard to break away from Palantir. I've heard it is one of the more expensive solutions, but it just works, and it's one of the most it has some of the best modules. We've seen those demonstrated in the demo day events, but I think the more that Palantir expands and the more they offer, the more difficult it becomes to be able to break away. And Apollo is perhaps the next step of that for the data sets and such.
Yeah, definitely agree.
Okay. And yeah, just to kind of wrap up the discussion on the operations side of things, let's just talk a little bit about the pace of innovation, because I think that's definitely something that's really important to get a grasp of. I've said a few times we had the launch of Foundry and Gotham 21, so they are committed to, I believe, year over year, pretty big improvements there. But we also know that Apollo is allowing them to do over-the-air updates rapidly. And did you have a figure on that? I was on a tweet thread where some of you guys were going back and forth on that.
No, yeah, it was Palantir Daily on Twitter. He thought there might be a correlation between Apollo upgrades and customer count, because it was something like 150,000 a week last quarter. And that's up from something like 50,000 a week the quarter prior. And so they're either improving so much so quickly, or to Palantir Daily's kind of thesis that or they have a lot more customers to manage. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they continue to publish those numbers over time, because that is incredible that Apollo can upgrade that software that quickly. And I mean, that's going to contribute well to their, I don't know what kind of expense that would normally go under, if it's, SG&A or, cost of goods. But the fact that Apollo can do it autonomously and you don't need as many engineers overseeing it, I mean, you can scale a lot better with something like that.
Yeah, so I wonder, you said 50,000 to about 150, right? Or maybe it's a little more than
Yeah,
that. So a 3x, I don't think they've 3x their um, commercial or government clients. So I
right.
think it is, to your point, a little bit of both in there. So I think that is definitely something to consider. Also, I wanted to bring up how I believe it was Carp said, yeah, it was on one of the recent interviews, which I really hope they continue that series because kind of going back to what we were saying in the beginning, the more he gets long form time with whoever it is, if it's a employee at the time to kind of bounce ideas off of, the more we get some insight into what he's thinking at that present moment, as well as what he's thinking for the future. So that's great. But also, he said kind of Foundry is hundreds of products, which you could kind of deduce yourself if you watch the demo event. But just having that
Yeah.
in words is really important because I feel that that's really kind of sums up what they've been working on for so long. It's taken them, I think, 17 years to get to where they are today, and they're not yet profitable. But it's kind of because of what they've been spending their time doing as a company, and it's really um, developing these products and Foundry being like so many different modules as a sum of a greater whole. I think there is something to be said about that.
Yeah.
And okay, so that under the pace of innovation. And also the other thing I wanted to bring up was the patents. I don't know if you've looked into any of these. They have been publishing them. Do you have any thoughts on the patents? It is, for me at least, just something to look at the pace of innovation, see if they are innovating. And it doesn't necessarily mean they instantly filed a patent, but I'm just wondering what you think about those perhaps being an indication of any sort of developments.
Yeah, somebody posted an index of all of the patents that they have. I haven't had a chance to look through it, but I did take a look at the patent that circulated a couple weeks ago regarding the geotagging feature in. I think they use it both in Gotham and Foundry because it looks familiar. Like I've seen it in a couple different demos, and so I think, yeah, they must have filed that patent, a couple of years ago or some time ago, and it was just approved. But yeah, I unfortunately most of it goes over my head because I'm not a software developer, software engineer, or anything. So I try to find where I've maybe seen it in a demo and then go watch the demo. But yeah, I definitely got to look more into what they have and what it means for them.
Okay. And last thing under the operations topic, I just want to talk about. Actually, we can move it on over to financials because I want to talk about talent and retaining talent, and that's kind of under the idea of stock-based compensation. So starting off, we kind of talked about the top line and revenue earlier on with the platforms, quarter over quarter growth, year over year growth. We're kind of expecting it to exceed 30%, which I think is a very healthy place to be. I do think in the coming years it'll be higher than that. We'll kind of have to reassess as we do with each incoming contract. I know a lot of people get excited about each contract, but it's kind of expected that Palantir is going to continue receiving these contracts, so it's not necessarily a good sign. It's a sign that they're on track. It's not necessarily a sign that the stock should go up the next day, which is what some people think. So it's good to see a huge contract, but I mean, Palantir is going to need lots of them to stay on track. So also just tying back to the idea of sales, do you think their recent reversion to a sales team is going to be helpful. Obviously, I think it will. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
It is interesting how they decided to kind of flip back to that. Do you have any thoughts on the idea of sales?
Yeah, it's interesting, and it almost feels like they were forced into really expanding their sales team, and I don't know, what kind of, hopefully it has an outsized benefit, and they don't need to continue to scale their sales team even more. Yeah, because if you look at SG&A, the sales, marketing, general administrative expenses, and R&D, if you exclude stock-based compensation from Q1 2020 to Q1 2021, that OpEx only increased 4%, while revenue increased, close to 50%, well above 40%. And so they've been doing very well, with SG&A remaining nearly flat while revenue's gone up significantly. So it'll be interesting to see if there is a boost in their marketing and sales expenses with this new team. But yeah, I'll be interested to see how that plays out.
Okay, and I'm not sure, were you referring to this at all in the figures you were talking about? Because this was one of the threads. Definitely something to look out for, guys, if you're not already following Jake here. Was this I was just looking. Was this part of it?
I don't mention the SG&A there. And actually
Okay.
let's see. Yeah, so these metrics, the adjusted gross margin, contribution margin, and operating margin, they first stated the target goals of greater than 85%, greater than 70%, and greater than 35%, respectively. They published those as they were going public during Q3 of 2020, and already, I give the figures that where they were at the time at 80, 55, and 30, and already they're well on their way. I mean, there was a huge jump in contribution margin. Actually in Q4 of 2020, it was 62%, and we just had a 2% drop in contribution margin, which means that it was contribution margin kind of highlights how efficiently they're onboarding new customers. Because you take revenue minus variable cost, and the variable cost is basically how much does it cost to acquire this customer, and that'll give you an idea of who your money makers are. And they can do this per account, per group of accounts, or for the overall, their entire business. And so you can think of that 60% contribution margin as 60% of everything that they're selling is going toward their bottom line once you minus out fixed operating expenses. So they're becoming extremely efficient at deploying their software, which looks more like a SaaS company, software as a service, than it does a consultancy company. And if they get higher than that 70% goal, that and their fixed expenses remain relatively flat, then it'll be very apparent that their bottom line will grow pretty significantly for each new customer that they acquire. So that's kind of my focus.
Yeah, great stuff. That's definitely a trend I'm looking for them to become, excuse me, more efficient as they go onboarding, because we've heard that from Sankar, I believe, in the past, and Karp has talked about it too. We did cover a lot of the financial stuff already. I think the last thing being profitability. That's kind of something that's in the back of everyone's mind, investors especially. Some people are expecting profitability this year. What are your thoughts?
So you can actually kind of model it. I did some like back of the napkin math last night. Actually, if you know a company's contribution margin and you know their fixed expenses, so their OpEx, then you can do a break even analysis. You divide their fixed expenses, their OpEx, divided by their contribution margin, and then that will tell you how much revenue they need to break even. And so, worst case scenario, let's say they stay flat at a 60% contribution margin. They'll need like 2.5 billion a year in revenue to break even. If they are, and so if they're growing at 30% per year, that'll take about 2.5 years. But we know that their contribution margin will get better. So if you calculate it at 70% contribution margin and growing at a healthy 40% per year, then it'll take a little over a year. But both of those scenarios are also assuming that their fixed expenses remain flat. So you could tweak that model. You could increase their fixed expenses, which we'll have a better idea of in, when they release Q2 numbers. And then, yeah, you can, and that also assumes that stock-based compensation remains relatively flat from Q1. So if everything kind of remains the same anywhere from a little over a year from now to 2.5 years out, somewhere in that window. But I'm hoping that stock-based compensation kind of tapers off, SG&A can remain relatively flat, and that they can exceed the 40% revenue growth year over year.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
On the idea of stock-based compensation, I'm not sure it is actually going to taper down. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I think if they continue hiring, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, it's actually going to increase, which wouldn't be good, but I don't believe it's going to increase as much as their revenue would, or whatever the comparable rate is.
Right.
So I do think they're on track for profitability, but at least I'm a little wary of the analysts. I think it was one of the analysts at least saying profitability this year, which could be putting a little bit of a sharp deadline on that. But it's good to hear that you think that they're nearing it, at least, considering how much
their
contribution
they're
margin
on
and
their way.
such.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Okay, well, I think that was pretty much everything I've got here. I don't want to keep you too much longer because the what event? Oh, the IBM, the IBM Palantir event is happening. Are you attending that?
No, I tried to register. I didn't make it in time.
Yeah, same. I'm not sure why Palantir tweeted out the link when it was already full, which is perhaps a little strange. But anyway, to wrap things up here, yeah, this was a great discussion. Thank you for coming on. And I do want to, of course, give you a huge shout out, your Twitter account.
Thank you.
Definitely need some more followers. He's doing really good work. Everyone, lots of Palantir analysis. I see you're maybe transitioning more to Palantir as a focus. I didn't see that there before. But anyway, investing in generational companies.
Yeah.
As a whole.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Akin. Yeah, and then this keeps shutting off. But what I do want to bring up as a last point here is your new YouTube channel, which is very exciting. So Jake just launched a YouTube channel. It's got 2 videos. Both are great. And I do love how you're kind of incorporating a Palantir feel to the graphics, which is pretty awesome. So kind of just talk about what you're going for. It does look like it's going to be focused on Palantir. Are you going to talk about other companies? What's kind of your idea? It's probably not daily news or anything like that. It's more of a deep focus akin to Dave Lee on investing, you had told
Yeah.
me, who is,
Yeah.
I wish would give Palantir coverage, but has not. But anyway,
Yeah.
I've loved what you've put out so far. So just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Definitely a focus on Palantir, and I was definitely inspired a lot by Dave Lee. I think his thought process about investing is so refreshing. He's got some really good principles and things that he looks for in companies, and it's really grounded me. Made me more of a long-term focused investor, and I'm really looking for companies who want to change the world, for the better. And so I'll be focusing a lot on Palantir on the channel. I might, eventually deviate and talk about other companies or things more, broad investing ideas. The quality is getting better video over video. Trying to figure out how to use my camera and my mic, but I'm having fun with it, and I'll keep putting stuff out.
That's great. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it because it's always great to have different opinions. I think you kind of taking that higher level approach to the videos, kind of what's the big deal? What does this mean? I think that's always great to have. And then just for some closing thoughts, do you have anything else to say about Palantir in this discussion? I'd love to have you back some other time. I know I don't want to keep you too much longer. This has already gone over a little bit here, but I think we got to some pretty great stuff. Maybe we'll have to talk about the potential Tesla and SpaceX partnerships some other time, because that is some speculation that I am very much interested in. But yeah, any closing thoughts here on the financials or anything else?
No, none that I can think of right now. Thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks again. So I will leave links to your stuff in the description, of course. And yeah, I'd hope to have you back on sometime else.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jake.